Hello, everyone, and welcome to Omni's live stream on our MCP server. Today, we have Gustav and Jack from our product and engineering team sharing a bit more about how we built it and a use case inspired by feedback that we've received from some of our customers who have already been using it and our own internal use as well. Since MCP servers are quite new, we're also going to kick things off with a little bit of an intro from Jack, so that no matter how familiar you are or not with MCP servers, you're going to have a jumping off point for today's presentation. But before we get started, I do want to let you know that we are recording, so you can access this later or come back to it. And also, we are going to be monitoring the chat right here in LinkedIn for any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. So feel free to type those in and I'll shoot them over to Gustav and Jack so we can try to get to as many of your questions as possible. And with that, I will kick it over to Jack so we can get started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tam, and welcome everyone. We're going to talk a little bit today about Omni's MCP server, specifically more around how we built it, is giving examples of how you can use it out in the wild. My name is Jack Sweeney from our product team. I'm joined by Gustav here from our engineering team. Gustav, you want to give a quick hello?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Yeah, as you said, I'm Gustav. I'm an engineer working on AI features and functionality at Omni. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, I had a hand in helping to ship.
Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and we can jump right in. We'll start with just a quick agenda, of course. We want to talk a little bit, as Tam mentioned, around three main things. The first is giving a little bit of context on what an MCP server is. This obviously popped up more recently, so for folks who may not be familiar, we want to give a little bit of primer and help kind of set the stage for what we'll be talking about. Then Gustav is going to walk through a little bit more about how we actually arrived to Omni's MCP server. Because this is a newer concept, it wasn't something we just kind of flipped a light switch on overnight. It was something we kind of arrived at over time and realized that customers found this useful and finding a lot of utility in it. So we'll talk a little bit about that journey there. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit through a demo and kind of show off a real world use case of how we can use Omni's MCP server along with some others out in the real world using Claude as our example for a front end there. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll jump in and we'll talk a little bit about what is an MCP server. And an MCP server, the way we think about it is essentially it's a way to let an LLM drive another application. And you'll see we've got our lovely little blobby mascot here driving the Omni car. Nice kind of little analogy for us. But the idea is that we're able to give LLMs a set of levers and knobs that are restricted to how they can operate with an application, but can operate it similar to how a user might. And with this, we're able to really offer them certain inputs and outputs that they're able to trigger to operate the tool, similar to how you might also see people interacting on the engineering side with APIs as well. So specifically talking about Omni's MCP server, this gives us the ability for Claude or ChatGPT or Cursor, really any front end you might use for these types of MCP server interactions, the ability to query your data via Omni. And this will be done in a little bit of a way. So rather than just doing a straight text to SQL approach, we actually use Omni's semantic layer in between to talk a little bit, to encode a little bit of that logic and structure and bring some nuance there. Now, what do we mean by that? It's a little high level, of course. We're going to jump to the next slide and kind of talk a little bit more through how this process kind of breaks down to show the step-by-step interaction there. The first step here is going to be around users asking a question in the LLM interface, probably like everyone's used to. So the same way you kind of pop into ChatGPT to ask a question about something you might be doing at work or just at home, you can go and kind of ask a question that will be directed out to Omni. And when do we get this question here? The LLM is going to translate this question into an Omni semantic query, and that's going to get sent down to Omni. Gustav, do you want to help give a little bit of color on like what a semantic query actually means? I know it's a little bit of a kind of an opaque term we have on the slide here.
Yeah, happy to help there. So I think traditionally queries are run on a database with SQL. So you might think of text to SQL as a common term you've heard out there. But we're writing semantic queries, and the semantic layer that Omni provides on top of your database has metadata like descriptions, labels, business terminology, all sorts of stuff about your business and your data model. And it also has permissions in that semantic layer. So when Omni transforms natural language into a semantic query, it's keeping track of the user's permissions, all the metadata and business terminology, instead of just writing a raw SQL query, which can't capture that quite as well.
Awesome. No, appreciate it. And as Gustav mentioned, this is really about providing a set of guardrails, consistency, and reliability to what can be an otherwise non-deterministic system. So we're able to capture business logic anywhere from the definition of joins from one table to another to context on specific fields that might be such as synonyms across key KPIs in the business that we might call different names, but still resolve to the same thing to drive more of that business specific tailoring that will really allow these models to shine and operate through the MCP as well. And we'll talk more about this as we go along, of course, too. So the next step of this, probably a little straightforward of what you might guess here, which is Omni generates the query and sends that result down to the LLM. So this is going, or back to the LLM rather. And then from this point on, we get back to the point that a lot of folks are probably familiar with all of these different interfaces, which is all that LLM goodness, where it's so good at interpreting, summarizing, pulling together all this information and drawing conclusions or helping accelerate us draw conclusions from that data, depending on your approach that you might be taking there. So before we hop over to Gustav, you want to just touch on real quick, kind of double clicking a little bit more on this semantic model. The idea of a semantic model is not necessarily a new one. There are some kind of traditional aspects of it in Omni's built-in semantic layer. Things, for example, like we mentioned earlier about defining joins from one table to another. So when a user interacts with a point-and-click UI, they're consistently getting that same join definition that a trusted data team has put together, and they don't have to worry about unreliability across join pathways or key metrics and keeping the business on the same page there. But with AI, what we realize is we also can stuff in a lot of other information that's going to be very contextual and helpful for the LLM, also leveraged by the MCP server. And a couple examples of that, just to speak broadly about it, we'll dive into a little more specifics as we go, are going to be the ability to set kind of like global tone, for example, around like warmth or response style, or having data set specific context where you might go and describe some nuance of the business about how we might want to take certain plain English conversational pieces and translate that into data. Or, for example, just knowing the values of a field underneath, making it easy to ask for very plain English questions of show me all my jeans orders rather than having to specify very robotically about where we might be looking in the database for this type of information. So a little bit of preamble there. We'll dive into all of this as we're going through Gustav's journey, but also we'll talk a little bit about this in the demo as well as we're kind of showing some of it live. With that, though, I'll pass it off to Gustav to talk a little bit about how we built this here at Omni.
Yeah, thank you, Jack, for the great introduction. So I'm going to cover how we built it, but before we get there, I want to talk about kind of 3 principles or things we tried to keep in mind while we were working on all of our AI functionality. And the first is, let's not boil the ocean. Let's try to find very small, well-defined, well-scoped avenues into the product where AI can make it better, make people faster, make the experience more delightful. The second is we want to listen to customers every step of the way. So if they give us feedback that something's bad, we want to take that and change direction. If it's good, then we'll double down on that. And the third is we want to leverage Omni's semantic model and Omni, the application, as much as possible. We think we have something really special at the core of the product, and we want to make it even better with AI rather than trying to use AI to go in a different direction. So let's jump in. The first feature we shipped with AI was about 2 years ago, and it was called Calcs AI. Some of you might be familiar with it. But when you're using the Omni workbook user interface, which looks a lot like a spreadsheet, and does in fact allow Excel calculations within those spreadsheets, we found that people love this, but Excel calculations are really hard to type, and it's hard to get the fields in the right order or remember what exactly that formula is. And so we decided to try out natural language to Excel formulas as our first AI feature. It would require a workbook that already had data in it to work, but we found that this really narrow scope worked really well because the AI didn't have to go through your whole database schema, all your joins, all your metadata. All it had to do is look at the fields or the columns in your existing current result set and then generate an Excel calc on top. We got a lot of feedback that this was a great experience, delightful, saved people time, but it led into people wanting to go do analysis not on top of just existing queries, but new queries altogether. So if we go to the next slide, the Calcs AI led us nicely into our AI query helper. We heard a lot of customers say, I'm at a blank workbook, like I want to get some data into the table to start my analysis from. And so we decided to invest and do a spike into, can we do natural language to Omni semantic queries? And we kept the scope limited. So we said it can only work in one topic at a time. So that in the topic in Omni limits the tables and the joins you have access to. It limits the fields. So the AI doesn't need to be aware of your whole schema or your whole database. It needs to only know a very small subset. We also didn't let it do calculations, no period over period analysis, no compound filters. So this really was like, can we just get AI to go from 0 to 1 with some consistency? And we thought it was pretty limited, and it certainly was. But our customers, as soon as they started using this internally, asked us if they could embed it. They wanted to give this natural language query helper to their users of Omni. And we said, absolutely, you can embed it because Omni lets you embed dashboards, workbook, content pages, essentially anything in Omni is embeddable. So we did a little bit of UI work and permissioning work, shipped it to customers, and we thought, this is great, it's going to be a huge hit. But it turns out that wasn't the case. Once we shipped the embedded natural language query AI, we got a lot of feedback that it didn't really know about your user or your user's business or your own business itself. And so it could only answer really generic questions. And so we decided to figure out how can we make or teach Omni about your specific business. So if we go next slide, that's where we invested in what we call AI context. So rather than just having our little AI helper Blobby know about your joins and your fields, we let modelers go into the semantic layer and add AI context on any field, on any topic, on any model. And this AI context might be business terminology. It might be, how users refer to specific metrics in plain English. It might be certain acronyms. It could also include synonyms or filter values. It really allows our AI helper to know, imagine, almost pretend or imagine there's someone in your business who knows and thinks like a business user when making decisions about which analysis to complete for you.
It's almost
And
like
it
just
turns
having
out,
your best. Oh, sorry. I
go
was
for it.
just gonna say, almost like having your best analyst just kind of like in the back pocket there.
Exactly. And it takes, oftentimes a really strong analyst to go in and set this up because you need someone who understands your business really well to go and teach Blobby about your business in a really effective way too.
Yeah.
And this was a bit of an inflection point for our AI functionality where once this landed, our CEO Colin and our VP of product Ariel sat down for a couple of days and said, we're going to add AI context or teach Blobby about Omni, our own business, and see if this can really work. And there was this all hands where Colin had this kind of like light bulb moment where he said, this is actually good enough that I would rather use this than work by hand, which for us internally was a huge signal that, if someone is strong with the tools Colin says this is preferable, then we should really double down on using and teaching Blobby with our semantic model to make it better. Let's go next slide. And so the workbook UI that we had in the past with the query helper and the AI calcs was sort of like guardrails and training wheels where anything the AI generated, you could see what it was doing in the workbook. You could see the fields it was picking, the filters it was adding. And that lets you audit what the AI was doing. But after we added all the training to Blobby, we felt there was enough trust that we could invest in a full page chat experience. So we decided to get rid of the workbook UI, expand that chat window, and let people have a conversation with Blobby without all of the kind of technical overhead of the UI it had previously. So you could ask a question, get a response back, a summary or an analysis of your responses. And if you did want to audit the answer that Blobby came up with, you could always jump back into the workbook from here to see exactly what it did with its filters, the data it pulled in. But it made it much easier to quick start, from 0, go to data result, and then get back to whatever you're doing during your day. So this was kind of like our first true self-serve analytics. And it was really only possible because we felt like we'd crossed that threshold where it was now accurate enough, you trusted it enough with your business knowledge that you didn't need the workbook to make you feel like you could trust what it was producing.
Maybe the one other thing to add too is just like I think this opened up like a whole new group of users who came in who like traditionally they might have been just looking at a dashboard and then asking their data team deeper questions about it, and they didn't feel comfortable going to build, which was something we knew was kind of a bit of an underserved group of users out there. And this really opened it up, like as simple as it can get, how many of us are just kind of typically working of ask question and get answer, like Gustav highlighted there as well.
Yeah, that's a great call out and actually touches on one of the limitations we had before where it could only work in one topic. With this UI, we invested in letting you use any connection, any model, any topic. So your AI has a lot more flexibility and scope where it can answer questions, which for a business user, you often don't want to think about what model you're in or what topic you're in. That's not important to you. You just want to get the right answer.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next slide. So as we're rolling all of this out, we're getting traction on the embed front, we're getting more traction internally. But customers wanted to be able to add Blobby's functionality and specifically the results that it produced to their own chat interfaces or their own products that they were building. Typically, this would have been done with APIs. And when we were starting to listen to this feedback, it was just at the beginning of this past year. And so we figured, yeah, APIs make sense for this. Let's go in that direction. That was before MCP really started to take off kind of, Q1, Q2 of this year. And so we wanted to build APIs, but we had a big technical hurdle we needed to get over, which was we'd always had the assumption Blobby was and our AI tools were going to work within Omni. And that meant you had to have a Google Chrome window up with the Omni UI there for any of this functionality to work because so much of it depended on your browser and your client side Omni application. But APIs don't have a browser, right? It all needs to happen inside of a server somewhere off in the cloud. So there was a big engineering effort to say, we have all these touch points. We need to pull all this functionality into the backend. So we built this kind of Omni AI service where now if you were to go into the APIs or you'd go into the full page chat or the workbook, it's all going to go to that single backend service as opposed to running in the client in the Omni application. So we had to do a lot of technical work to get APIs to work, and we shipped them and no one was using them. And in hindsight, it makes sense no one was using them because APIs are very rigid and LLMs don't really have a clear way to just say, well, I'm going to now make this random API call to this tool. They were trained to work with what we decided to build next, which was the Model Context Protocol or an MCP server. So we took the foundation that we built with APIs on the technical side, and we decided to package that up into an MCP server and give any LLM client access to all the tools we've built. So the MCP server in some ways is almost like the cherry on top of all the work we did in the past to make results better, to make them consistent across every single touch point, APIs, chat interface, workbook. So now that when you go into Omni via Claude desktop, you're going to get the same results as you would in the chat interface or in the workbook or in the APIs. And that's kind of an overview. Hopefully it wasn't too technical, and I'll pass it back off to Jack now.
Awesome. Thanks, Gustav. I think really just good to highlight along the way, like the journey we took to build there and all the kind of, as you mentioned, like the incremental pieces that all built on one another. I think another thing worth highlighting too is just a huge North Star of what we were doing and what we continue to do with this is a very heavy focus on query quality. We think there's a lot of different things that stem out from these types of interfaces, but the consistency and accuracy of results is really what matters to folks in a lot of cases. So that grounds a lot of our work here and how we're really focused on this as we do kind of iterate and release new stuff out into the field, into production for folks to play with. So it's something that's a continued focus. You'll kind of continue to hear us hit on that throughout today, but also if you watch any of our demos or anything out on our marketing pages there too, that's something we're very focused on there too.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack. And I know we're about to switch in to the live product, but you just teed up one of the questions that we received perfectly. So I might as well throw it
Sure.
in now. So this is a question from Robert. So thank you so much, Robert. And he's wanting to know if you prompt Blobby and MCP with the exact same question, would it return the same result?
That's a great question. We had to promise Robert isn't a plant. That's actually part of our planned demo here. We'll show that off a little bit. The short answer is yes. So we should expect the same result. Basically, as you'll see in this little GIF here in the clip, we're actually going to have a prompt. I wish I could pause these, but you can see that kind of prompt that pops in. If we take that same prompt and pass that back, that will be what's actually getting passed to Omni. We'll show there will be kind of that consistent result as well. So great question, something we will show off there too. But as Gustav mentioned, since we all are kind of using the same architecture under the hood in every place, it should be consistent given that it's grounded in that same semantic layer and all those definitions as well. All right. And I will show that, Robert. So if we hold on to that thought for just a little, we'll get there in just a moment. But want to just kind of mention before we jump into the demo, I think like two of the superpowers of how we think about MCP servers are the ability to marry data from different sources together in one place, as we kind of touched on earlier, and also just the ability to make that data actionable from a single location. With Omni's MCP server, we get the ability to go combine warehouse-driven insights through Omni's semantic layer, providing that consistency and query quality with unstructured data that lives in tools like Notion or Google Drive, for example. So you can get a more holistic view of your business from a single point of access. Plus, the benefit is that you don't necessarily have to flip screens between Notion and Omni to go grab a number and then flip back to grab a different number and kind of rotate between tools as people often might have to do today. These tools are able to kind of all be driven through the MCP server. So to take a look at this, before we jump into our example, I'm going to actually switch my screen over to Claude here. And we're actually going to answer Robert's question here with just a simple kind of question. And I'm going to drop in just a quick prompt here, which is just how many orders do we have last month? Before we hit go, we'll see that I actually have a couple different tools set up within Claude here. So you'll see I'm using some of the native functionality. We have web search for enable or hooked up Drive and Gmail search. We also do have a Notion MCP, which we'll use a little bit today, as well as the Omni MCP, which is going to be able to go and run those queries. So when I hit this request here and I just hit go, we'll see that this is going to go ahead and run our question in Claude. And as we get a response, it is going to actually reach out to Omni's MCP server. So we'll see that it's going to leverage one of our two tools to start, which is going to go select a topic, which you can really think about like as a data set. And then it's going to go and actually run a query against Omni. And you'll see, we can see the prompt that it's actually going to take, this how many orders do we have last month, which is near identical to my initial question there. And it chose a topic, it kind of returned a query, and we'll see the result, which is about 9273 orders in the month of July. Now, if I take this same question, and we'll just flip over real quick back to our Chrome window here, I'm going to jump into Omni, and we'll see that if I go over into our chat interface, I can go ahead and paste the same questions in, and we'll see that this is actually going to respond back with a result for us through our interface here, Blobby. And this should return the same result for us here. And we'll see that 9273. And this would be the same if I were to go into our workbook interface here as well. As Gustav showed earlier, we have our kind of little co-pilot within the workbook. I could go ask the same question here if I'd like, and we'll see the same kind of result pulled through. So it's going to be consistent across that experience. Depending on where you might be asking that question, we'll see we're kind of arriving at that same result there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to also just kind of take a quick look, aside from Omni, just to show off that we do also have Notion running in the background here. And within Notion, I've got this kind of sample little workspace set up just for our demo. We've got two main documents. One is a holiday marketing playbook, which has kind of been something we're hoping to run for our upcoming year. The other is a Black Friday retrospective. And the kind of position of our demo here is going to be centered around working on a BizOps team at an e-commerce company that's gearing up for Black Friday. Technically, we're probably a little late for the Black Friday rush, but we'll pretend we might be looking at this maybe several months earlier or just a more appropriate time. But in this case, our exec team has asked us to plan for a summary presentation coming up tomorrow on Friday. And we also want to make sure we have an action plan in Notion for the team to kind of track against to make sure this all goes off without a hitch. So using Omni and Notion, we're going to go ahead and kind of operate off of this assumption to go get those two outputs. And in our Omni, what we saw earlier, I'll just show once more back in Chrome here, is we have this whole set of data that's centered around our order transactions, our inventory, our users, just really central to the use case we're kind of focused on here that we'll be mostly operating out of. And with that, we can go ahead across those other documents as well. We'll move into Claude and we'll go ahead and kind of jump in. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll actually just start a clean chat here just to kind of start fully from scratch. And we'll see once again, we do have these tools both on and active. And what we're going to do is we're going to jump right in and kind of get this started. So I'll start with a very kind of simple ask of maybe we want to take a look at that retro doc to start, just to see a quick summary of it and any lessons we might have learned. And we'll see that Claude is going to go, it's going to operate across now the Notion MCP, where it's going to go and kind of read from that document that we have in our Notion workspace. It's going to extract some information and provide a nice summary for us here. And what we can also do is we can see that we are going to, well, it looks like it might have actually missed on the first time here. It's going to see if we can find it on a second go. If not, we've got a kind of pre-built example of something there that did all go through, but it looks like on that second try, it was able to go find it. So it's going to go give us a nice kind of summary and response of this document here. So instead of me scanning and doing all this work manually and having to kind of compile this, I can quickly ask it to go pull from our existing repertoire of information. And we'll see that it's going to go and kind of pull through some different insights around inventory planning, maybe checking around our infrastructure to make sure we can handle the incoming load on our site, or just around the mobile traffic that we're going to have so that we can make sure our UX and UI is all set up correctly. So we've got kind of some starting points here from how we might want to be thinking about this. Maybe I want to ask a question specifically around the inventory here, or maybe more generally, I just want a broader window of data to look across aside from just 2024. So I'm going to paste in another question here, which is going to ask us for year-over-year GMV or gross merchandise volume for folks who might not be as familiar with the e-commerce space, revenue, and also total orders. We're going to look at this for the last 3 Black Fridays, and we want to see just kind of a summary with a little bit of formatting around it. So as I go and run this, we'll see, oh, it looks like it wanted to try and use Notion there. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just prompt it very directly. I'll pause it and I'll say, ask Omni for data for this, and I'll go ahead and rerun this so we can kind of tweak that specifically and make sure that everything is going to go to the correct location if it doesn't get it right on the first time there. So we'll see that it's going to go ahead and it's going to run a series of queries for us to go kind of pull this information. One of the interesting things is it's able to pull multiple queries at a given time. It doesn't have to do like one query and then summarize that data and one query, summarize that data. It can go and kind of pull multiple sets of information for you as well. And as this runs here, we'll give this just a moment. It's going to kind of pull together this information for us. We'll then kind of get a summary out on top of this that we can then use to pull a little more color or just a little more information around the business before we jump into our presentation or create our action plan.
Perfect. And Jack, if it's okay with you, we're getting several questions coming in, so I won't throw them all at you at once. But
All
while
good.
this is loading, I thought I would share the next one. So we have a question asking, how are we thinking about managing context and multi-turn long chat?
Yeah, good question. And this might be, it's an interesting question. Gustav, I'd love your perspective on this as well, because I know you've worked quite a lot with our kind of interaction of Claude, but also with Claude Code and some other places. From my perspective, I think as I've been using these tools outside of Omni, and I'll talk a little bit about within Omni, I try to keep in the very long running chats using things like projects if the front end offers those to kind of focus and guide those with instructions. I think also knowing when, if it gets to a certain level of too much length in context within a specific chat, you can ask it to actually summarize all the things that have happened to that date, or maybe a subset of those interactions that you might really care about recently, into a new prompt that you can actually kind of feed back into a fresh start and use that as a nice new starting point. Has been one of the tips that I've used quite a bit as I've been working in this, but Gustav, would love your perspective too, because I know you've got a lot of interaction with these systems.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in Claude, we don't have as much control over, how they handle context in a multi-turn conversation. But internally, if you're using the Omni chat interface, what we do is we tend to favor more recent messages in the conversation to keep those in the context. So if you have a really, really long running conversation, you can think of it as the older messages and the older result sets get kind of pruned down or become fuzzier to the AI. And we try to keep the most recent parts of the conversation fresh in the AI's context. So if you have a really long running conversation, it's probably best to start a new chat, but we do have some algorithms in place to try and like intelligently, decide what does the AI really need to know to answer the next question you're asking in those long running conversations.
Yeah, it's a great call out. Awesome. I know there's probably a bunch of other questions, Tam. I'll let you know in just a sec. We should have after we get this next prompt or two in, we should have plenty of time to cover some. Just to show folks real fast, we do have kind of this quick summary that it pulled together, and we could see Claude actually wrote up a nice little artifact for us over here on the right as well, which is just a kind of cleaner representation of what we have over here on the left. Now, this is great right here, but as a user, I might want to share this with 10 people on my team. And instead of just kind of copy pasting this into Slack, what I can do here is I can actually ask this to write it into a new Notion page. So with the Notion MCP, I can actually kind of write this back directly. Again, not having to copy paste or flip between different areas. We'll see that it's going to go and operate that tool to go create a page. And if I flip back to my Notion space here as an example, we'll see in just a moment. I have this kind of directed to land in my private space at the moment. We will get a new page that pops in here after that after that tool is kind of done running its course there. That will pop right into my private space, making it accessible for us. And we'll see that kind of all pulled through. So again, really just emphasizing the ability to have a single point of access for working across all these different tools, not having to flip between those different pieces. I can see here, it looks like it might have failed on the first go, and it might actually not be too happy on the Notion side for the MCP server. So potentially something that isn't coming through just yet. We're checking one more time. I'll show you just in Claude here, we can see it's doing its best to retry for us, but we do have the ability to kind of go write this back. It looks like it might not want to play ball with us at the moment here, which is okay. But this is a possibility as well to kind of drive it all from a single spot. So I'll go ahead and we'll pause that here. And let's just pretend that if that had worked, we could kind of continue our analysis. We've got our action plan for the team, but we do still want to put together a bit of a summary for everyone that we can also use to roll out for the executive team in a deck. And so I'm going to go ahead and we'll pull together kind of one set of insights here that we might want to marry into that instead of just for our action plan. And this is going to be around looking at our past performance, inventory, understanding any risks we might have around stockouts or certain products we might need to pay closer attention to. What's particularly interesting about this question here is it's going to go and query against Omni using that semantic layer, but it's also going to go ahead and pull in information from Notion. So not just being restricted to a single tool or a single MCP server within a given request, we're able to marry all these things together and have just kind of a nice ability to go through all these different pieces. We'll see it's going to go kind of grab some information using that in Notion. Looks like it actually wants to jump the gun here and try and make a new page. So it's learning a little bit from our past ask. It's trying to kind of repeat some of that. We can let it go ahead and try and run for just a moment. But the key thing here is, even though this might take a moment or two, if you were to compare this with the level of effort and the time it might take for an analyst to go compile a report like this, this is relatively quick and painless for going through all these different processes. And I'll flip over real fast just to show folks to our previous run of this that didn't have as many kind of gaps on the server side there, but we could see that it's able to go and kind of create pages in Notion where it's gone and dropped all that in, as well as for some of these different pieces, it's able to really compile all of this in one place in a single go. So just kind of showing again the possibility of connecting all the dots here between this. I'll flip back to our live chat before we go into our last step. Tam, I see you might be back with another question for us as well.
Yes, apologies because I have a few.
No worries.
So I'm going to throw a few at you at once, Jack. Some of these folks have been waiting. So first off, we've got a few questions around security. And I know this first one from Allison, Cade from our team already responded in the chat, but I think it's definitely worth just kind of, discussing live a little bit. So the question is, how does it work with applying individuals' permissions?
Yeah, good question. Gustav, I'll kick this one off, but if you want to jump in too, I know you got some stuff in flight here. So today, this will be kind of working through an API key that will be tied to the creator of the API key. So it's not yet just user scoped. We do have some work that we're actually working on and getting pretty close with of having this be more of a user scope kind of paradigm. So really passing through those permissions. The nice thing is that will be tied to some type of identifier, whether it's an API key or a specific identifier with a user. Uh, Once that is all in place, you get to leverage all of the other work that you've already built up within Omni for that permission structure. So if you're already incorporating row level security as your users might be looking at or building dashboards in Omni, if they're working in the MCP server and they're using that same kind of attribution of how we're tying those two folks together, that will also be passed through. And that kind of applies to all different aspects of how you might be querying the data, but it's this nice kind of evolution and pulling through of all the different permission structures that already exist in Omni into this MCP server once that aspect is in place in the short future here. Gustav, anything you want to add there too? I know stealing a little bit of of your side of the house
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, so on the technical side, before we run any query that gets generated, we pass in the user who wants to run it and the Omni semantic query to our, almost like you'd call it like our query running service within Omni to do a permission check. So it says, is Jack allowed to run this query? Is there any part of it that Jack doesn't have access to? If he does, let's throw an error and indicate which field or table or whatever it is that they don't have access to. So we're never just generating a query and running it. We're always doing an internal check to make sure you have every single permission applied correctly for the query that was generated.
Excellent. Thank you. And if it's okay with you both, I've got a couple other questions kind of on
Yeah.
that same thread that I wanted to throw in. You spoke to them a little bit, but just want to make sure that we cover them. So another question is just asking about our general thoughts on security of data transmitted through the MCP server, especially with dealing with particularly sensitive industries. Jack, Gustav, you just spoke to this a little bit, but anything that you would want to add?
Yeah, I think maybe the only other thing to add is like, so obviously like this is very top of mind for us that like as data is kind of passing through. There are several different things we're kind of working towards on the architecture side to allow folks to potentially have this kind of connected up through certain areas or potentially in the future bringing your own model, I would say. Having the ability to kind of choose a little bit more of the different aspects of this. It is absolutely something that's like top of mind in the direction we're building in. Would love to. I'm not sure the name of the person who might be reaching out there too, but if they do want to chat with us, we'd be happy to kind of talk a little more directly about specific needs there too, because I know every company can be a little different about what they might be trying to solve in the security front or what their architectural setup might be look like and the constraints they're working within. That's something our team is pretty well versed in handling and working through with folks as well. So as those things do come up, we're more than happy to have conversations about it. We want to be partners with folks as they're kind of going through and solving those things, and happy to make that a reality as we're working through it there too.
Awesome. And yeah, that question was actually from one of our partners. So Nick will be sure to connect with you on that a little bit more. And then one other question I wanted to throw in at this point, I see actually Jamie Davidson has joined the chat and responded to this, but just for folks listening, we have questions about, if OAuth is on the roadmap for Omni's MCP server.
Yeah, I think maybe the way to, and I'm curious, we'll see if Jamie and I's response align there. But I think the way we kind of talked earlier about having a kind of a user level attribution of how we're scoping these permissions and such will be something that's possible. I think like the direct mechanism, again, will vary from customer to customer of how they might set things up on their warehouse side and what makes the most sense. Again, I hesitate a little bit to rule in absolutes. I think there's a lot of nuance in each person's kind of configuration, but OAuth is something we have worked with in the past. It's something we do support. So short answer is probably yes. Longer answer is probably let's talk about what makes sense the most for each person that might be kind of looking at this. But yeah, it's a great question.
Perfect. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask one more that's come in just at
Let's
this
do it.
point so then I can let you get back. So you
All
kind of
good.
touched on this a little bit earlier, but we have a question. Have you configured any kind of system prompt in Claude Desktop to hint that you are asking questions relevant to the Omni MCP server?
That's a good question. I don't have anything like that set up in my configuration today. I've used a variety of different front ends for kind of working with our MCP server. So I've used Cursor quite a bit, for example, which has been handy for some other use cases. I have used rule files there, which is kind of similar to some of those system prompts in Claude where you can direct things. I think it's a really great tactic for whatever kind of system you're using. There's a lot of tuning that can be done to help direct things a little bit more. In this case, this is actually just kind of all stock off the shelf. So it does work pretty well with that. I think the benefit to those, though, is really tailoring to your specific workflow, finding a little bit, maybe there's hooks or specific ways you like to signify what tool you might want to use to be extra explicit, to use a little bit of shorthand. That can also be really beneficial as well, but not something we have set up in this demo here specifically. All right.
Perfect. We are good for now. Thank you.
Sweet. Well, I'll come right back to you in just a sec, Tam. So maybe the last piece of this, obviously, is we kind of wanted a deck. And today, we're going to ask, based on this kind of whole analysis that we got here, it actually did come through. I might have misread some of these responses here at first, but we have the ability to go and kind of pull through information. I'm going to ask for like a quick 5-slider around things like historical projections, trajectory of what we think is going to happen, risks, forecasts, and maybe just an action plan so we can react to this. You'll see I am specifically asking for this in HTML and CSS. So I'll go ahead and I'll kick this off. Reason for that today is that there isn't actually a direct way with tools that we found, at least, or I've found. If you do know of one, please let me know, because it'd be a huge time saver to directly hook into like Google Slides or PowerPoint for like an MCP server to go generate those decks and a lot of the tools that people feel are most native. It can be used, excuse me, to go create artifacts where we can generate these things that are PDFs, downloadable. We can share it out with the team. So I think this is something that we're seeing, as Gustav mentioned, a very early ecosystem that's still kind of continuing to evolve and grow. We anticipate that growing quite a bit. And I think it's safe to assume that a lot of those very well-used tools will likely have those hooks sooner rather than later for making these workflows even more automated and kind of fully end-to-end. Maybe just to touch on quickly, like some other quick use cases as well. We've seen quite a bit have been reading things out of Google Docs, as we mentioned, aside from just Notion to work with that. We have seen some folks kind of very early who have started to explore using a tool like Glean, for example, to query their unstructured data, Omni to query their structured data, marrying all that together. There's a lot of possibility out there when you start to really open up the ecosystem. If you do start to dive into anything particularly interesting, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to learn more about it. I think these things are really exciting as we start to see more and more tools out in the ecosystem and the possibilities really open up. And maybe the one other thing to mention too is we will of course be offering kind of more tools over time as well. I think Gustav, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to touch on there. I know we don't have anything like explicitly that we're sharing with folks just yet, but I think very receptive to as folks are kind of thinking about other pieces they might want to use out in the world of Omni. We'd love to kind of hear more about those as we start to think about what's next.
Yeah, that's right on. I mean, we have 2 tools today: the ability to pick your data set and get your results back. But we're listening closely and thinking about what are the next tools to add, if they're going to be content related or more modeling related. Yeah, we're very open to feedback there.
Yeah. Sweet. Maybe the last thing I'll show here, we do have our slide deck. It went through and created something a lot quicker than I would have made it, especially if you asked me to do with HTML and CSS, but certainly faster than I would have done it in Excel or slides. We can kind of see some of the different information mapping back to our original request. We can now download this, kind of send it off to the team, maybe put it out into Notion as well if we'd like. The possibilities are really endless. But with that, we'll kind of conclude the quick demo portion there. Would love to pass it back. Tam, if there are any, I imagine there might be a few other questions from the audience that we might be able to answer for folks.
Can I jump back in real quick with your,
absolutely.
If you're willing to pull up Claude again?
Yeah. Let's do it.
And this might be kind of an obvious observation, but if you go back to the first slide at the beginning, so all the numbers here, right, they're just to highlight, they're coming from different places, right? So the historic time series data came from our Omni query that we ran earlier that was asking for revenue and inventory over the past 3 years. And then some of the data in this slideshow is going to come from Notion, from the retrospective from 2024, and also the plan for 2025. And so all the different data sources that you connect with the MCP can all be pulled together into this final report. And if it'd be very hard to manually verify, but if you scroll back up to one of those get data requests from Omni, let's just pick like one of these out. So if you scroll down, you can see the query that's actually running. You can see the results that are going to be coming back as well in these get data requests. So if you're ever curious to see like, oh, I got a number in here, where did it come from? You can try to go back and audit what the MCP did and where the results came back, right? So here you're seeing some sales data that came back from Omni. So just wanted to call that out. It's probably very clear, but wanted to double.
No, I think that's an excellent call out and something I neglected to mention. And it's a great point, Gustav. I think earlier to that context question as well, is it's reaching across that conversation. It's not necessarily just off last run, and it's marrying all those different sources as well into a single document. Thanks for keeping me honest there too. All right, Tam, maybe back to you. I don't know if there are, I imagine there might be one or two others, but happy to take questions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So there are a few comments going back and forth. Definitely a lot of interest in our plans to support OAuth. And then also we've got some folks in the chat who are offering Gustav and Jack to connect with you later on about use cases and some of our customers sharing how they're thinking about it. So for those of you in the chat, Allison, Robert, everyone, we are definitely making note and are just going to be following up with you directly as well to get a little bit more of that information. So thank you so much. I believe with that, as I refresh, that is everything that I am seeing at the moment. So just a really quick thank you again to everyone who joined us live, everyone who asked questions throughout. Thank you so much to Gustav and Jack and our entire team for working hard to make this happen, and just our customers, even for everyone who wasn't on today for, sharing feedback. And as Gustav had said, everything that we've been building, especially, across Omni, but especially on the AI front, has been, so much in response to kind of your feedback and what you want to do. So please keep that coming. If you are unfamiliar with Omni and you want to follow our product development a little bit more closely, check out omni.co/demos. Our engineering team actually demos internally every single Friday what it is that they're working on and what's in progress. And then we actually post that on the website. So we build fast and we build in the open, so you can follow along. And as a reminder, this is being recorded. You can access it via this exact same link if you want to come back to it later. And just thank you again to everyone for joining us.
Thanks all.